My name's Martin Thurgate. I'm one of the directors here at the Diamond Group. And one of my roles here at Diamond is that I get to meet with a lot of business people and discuss their technology strategy. So obviously cloud is a big part of that discussion. So today what we're going to do is discuss the top 5 things that you should know before moving to the cloud. So we're going to cover some of the basics, just what it is and how it works. We're going to explore whether it's right for you, and this may sound like a funny topic in this discussion, but really what we're looking at is just some of the circumstances where it might not actually be the right time to adopt a full cloud strategy. We're going to look at some key benefits, and then we're going to take a look at some things that are just important to consider when you're looking to adopt a cloud strategy. Okay, so just looking at what it is, in terms of the history, cloud really in reality has been around for decades, and it's not so much the cloud that's new, it's actually the use of the word cloud to describe internet-based technologies that's really new. So there are some terms that you might have heard 10 years ago or so, things like ASP or Application Service Provider, hosting, virtualization. These terms have been used for a long time and are essentially very similar to the use of the word cloud. But if we look at what it is, essentially what cloud refers to is accessing some kind of service. It might be an application, it might be storage via the internet. So that's a basic sort of definition of cloud. Some of the myths around cloud, and I think one of the main ones, particularly for businesses, is that if you're not immediately adopting a full cloud strategy right now, then somehow you're doing something wrong. So again, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in some coming slides, but there's some circumstances around where it might not be the right strategy right now. In terms of where the future or where we're headed with cloud, I think it helps to sort of look back and in terms of the journey, 30 years ago we had mainframes and we're connected to mainframes via dumb terminals and a simple DOS prompt that some of us might remember. And then came along the PC and so with the PC, what fundamentally changed there is the way that we use computing and it became more in the client-server model. So you often had a server in your environment that had your files, your applications, and from a PC you connected to that server to access those resources. So that's really where we were and even up to today. And really I think where things are changing most notably is that software vendors who traditionally wrote their applications for the client-server model are no longer writing it for that model, and they're actually adopting a cloud strategy. So in other words, what they're doing is they're writing their applications to be accessed via a simple web browser. So that's really the fundamental change that I see happening. And as time goes on, I think more and more of those traditional line of business applications will actually become cloud applications. So how does it work? And I think it really helps to look at this in 2 sort of separate ways. So as I just mentioned, cloud software is one of the ways that you can look at cloud. So we've been using this for many, many years. If you've used Facebook or LinkedIn, if you have a Gmail account, if you've got an iCloud account, these are all cloud-based services. So potentially you're already using them now. A good example, I think, of a cloud-based application is Xero. So most people have heard of Xero. It's an accounting package, and it was really born in the cloud. In other words, there was never a client-server product. It was actually something that was developed with the cloud in mind. So to use Xero, you just log into it via a web browser, and away you go. So that's when we're thinking about cloud applications. That's really quite distinct from cloud-based computing. So the terminology that some people use around this is the private cloud. And so what we're referring to here is that you still are using the traditional client-server model, but rather than having on-premise infrastructure, you're essentially subscribing to computing generally via a data center. So that's often called hosting. Another possibility here is that you actually do own the infrastructure, but you have that infrastructure located within a data center. So that's called co-location. But in terms of what I see and the discussions that I have with most business people, what we see mostly is a hybrid. So what I mean by that is that a lot of businesses are still running a traditional client-server model for certain parts of their business. So it might be for their files, for their office documents. It might be a particular line of business application that they run that still needs the traditional client-server model. But they might also be using some cloud technologies as well. So they might have, for example, their emails in the cloud rather than on an on-premise server. So this is really very, very common. In fact, I'd say that the vast majority of businesses have actually adopted more of a hybrid model, using some on-premise technology still, but cloud as well. So this brings us, I suppose, to the question of, is it right for you? And I think this is really just down to the unique circumstances of your business. So I speak to a lot of people, and you know, some people unfortunately aren't in great locations for internet connectivity. I don't know if people realise, but certainly in Australia, our broadband is certainly by world standards not very good at all. And so some people are in poor areas that are poorly serviced. If they were to get an internet connection that was suitable for the cloud, they might be paying, you know, thousands of dollars a month for that kind of connectivity. And for a lot of small businesses, that's just a lot of money, and it makes the proposition of going full cloud really quite difficult to justify. With the NBN coming along, of course, that's changing the dynamic of things. And a lot of businesses who were unable to adopt any cloud platform, even a hybrid model, with the NBN coming along, are now able to get a better connection and are better able to adopt some cloud strategies. The other key driver, I think, and in terms of determining whether a cloud strategy is right for you is the software applications that you use. So as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of software vendors are now developing new versions of their product for the cloud. And so I think it really is a discussion that you need to have with your software vendors about where are they headed. So that's a really important discussion. If you're not having that discussion now, you certainly should be, because it's really important to understand where are they headed in a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. What will their product look like at that time? If we look at the benefits, certainly one of the benefits is that it can reduce costs. Now, I'm always a little bit wary when I make this point because it can go the other way as well. It can actually, in some cases, vastly increase your costs depending on, again, your particular circumstances. But for the most part, you know, you're generally looking at a reduction. So, for example, you know, if you have a traditional client-server line of business application today, and it requires SQL Server, for example, the cost of SQL is now very, very expensive, and that's if your line of business software vendor then adopts a cloud model, that can save a lot of money because then you're just paying for a subscription. You're not having to buy a very expensive database application for the back end. Another way that you can reduce cost is Office 365. It's if you haven't heard, basically Office 365 is really two things. It's Office for your desktop, and it's also a cloud service for your emails via Exchange Online, and also SharePoint. So with SharePoint, you can save files, you can run workflows and those types of things. Looking at some other benefits, one of the key benefits is accessibility, and cross-platform is one of the terms that are commonly used. What this means is that with a lot of the traditional client-server software, you had to have really Microsoft technologies to use it. So you had to have a Windows server and a Windows operating system on the desktop. With cloud technologies, what you can do is, because you're accessing it via a web browser, it really doesn't matter what platform you're on. You can be on a PC, but you can also be on a Mac, you can be on an iPhone or an iPad, you can be on an Android. It doesn't really matter because all you need is a web browser to connect to a cloud-based service. Mobility is another advantage. Obviously, you're able to connect from anywhere. So long as you've got an internet connection, you're able to access that cloud-based service that you're using. So some other benefits, scalability is certainly a benefit, particularly in terms of the server hosting that we mentioned before. So let's imagine a scenario where, for example, your business has expanded. Perhaps you've purchased another business and your staff count's going to increase by 50%. With cloud-based technology, you can really rapidly increase the number of users that you are subscribing to for a service, or you can increase memory, you can increase storage really quickly and easily. So really, this is probably one of the main areas that I'm going to focus on today, is talking about new technologies and new ways of doing things. So what people don't probably realize about the cloud is that there's a lot of great applications that are now available. So I think what a lot of people do is they have one or two key line of business applications that they use internally, and they tend to then put the blinkers on to some extent and aren't actively looking at what's in the market that might solve some of their internal workflow issues. An example that I like to use is, for Diamonds, we started using a cloud-based HR platform. And really this has just saved us an enormous amount of time, because in the past what we had is probably, like a lot of businesses, just an internal Word template, and each time somebody new came along we had to adjust the template, and it was just a lot of mucking around. Whereas the HR package that we're now using, it's cloud-based. It has a really simple-to-use wizard. So with around about 10 different clicks, I can immediately generate a contract, a new contract for a new starter. So just an example, DocuSign is another one that I think a lot of people should consider. So for any organisations that give proposals to customers or have contracts or anything like that, DocuSign is a way that you can electronically accept proposals and contracts, rather than, of course, asking your customer to print them out and sign them and, scan them and email them back to you, which obviously is a bit of mucking around. DocuSign, with a couple of clicks, you can have that proposal signed or have that contract signed. So this is really just examples of the types of things where there's a lot of cloud-based applications out there. And if you haven't done a review recently, I would recommend that you consider going to an app marketplace. So a really good example is Telstra. Telstra have an app marketplace with a whole range of different cloud-based applications there. So well worth checking out, and you might just find one that solves an internal issue that you have now. And lastly, looking at benefits, obviously there's a benefit in terms of if you've got less infrastructure internally, obviously that frees up space in terms of real estate. It also saves money in terms of power consumption. So there's some obvious sort of benefits in that way as well. And so the final point here is that there are some really important things that you shouldn't forget when you're looking at the cloud. So particularly if you're going and looking at hosting, so moving your traditional client server computing into, say, a data center, for example, don't forget backup. So it's really easy to think, well, it's going to a data center and surely that's all taken care of. It's actually not taken care of by default. And you do need to talk to your IT integrator and the data center provider just to understand what backup options are available. So make sure you're having that conversation. Security is another important factor as well. So it's obviously because you're accessing services via the internet, obviously your security practices internally need to be quite tight, and you need to make sure that your staff are adhering to good security practices. But I'd also recommend that you speak to the service provider's security as well, and just ask them what their security practices are. Just make sure that you're happy that they've got security in mind. And lastly, don't forget about data. Obviously, if you're going to be adopting a cloud strategy, that's going to increase your internet usage. So if you don't have an unlimited plan, just make sure you're monitoring your usage and staying on top of it. And so just a final point here is that just to remember that a lot of IT companies are touting, that we've got a cloud platform, we've got cloud solutions. And I see this with a lot of quite small boutique IT companies saying that they've got their own cloud platform. And in reality, I think what's happening is that they're running it on a shoestring budget, and they really just don't have that reliability or security or redundancy that you will get with a national or international carrier such as Amazon or Microsoft. So it's something just to keep in mind, that they're not all created equal, and yeah, look, it's well worth doing the research, even if you can, going and visiting the data center, just seeing what it's all about. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I realise it was quite a fast webinar, just going through these topic areas. If you've got any questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat window. And just a reminder too that we run regular webinars here at Diamonds, and the next one coming up is around cybersecurity and in particular working from home, and just some things that you need to look out for there.